Hi, everybody. This is Jeff Weisenberger, editor and publisher of Modern Steel Construction, which, as you know, is the monthly magazine of AISC. And across from me is Heather Gilmer, who is a senior engineer with Pannoni. She's being honored with an AISC Lifetime Achievement Award, which recognizes individuals who have made a difference in the success of AISC and the structural steel industry. She's being recognized for her significant contributions to steel bridges, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Welcome, first of all, Heather, and congratulations on your award.
Thanks a lot.
As Charlie said, I mean, you can always win another Lifetime Achievement Award, too. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, because I've been thinking it was downhill from here.
Nope. The expectations are really high now. So, well, yeah. So, I mean, you know, we're talking about a lifetime. Let's go back to the beginning. Where are you from, and where did you grow up?
That is a good question. Short answer: Long Island, Israel, New Jersey.
Okay. Wow. Two of those are really close to each other. The other one's not.
True. My grandfather moved to Israel, and then for lack of anything better to do, my mother moved to Israel and took me with her,
Okay.
and then we came back. I there's not a lot of depth to it.
Sure. No, I gotcha.
So I was there first grade to third grade.
Okay.
Which were kind of formative years.
Sure.
And in a lot of ways, it makes me socially kind of like an immigrant kid.
Sure.
Because I was pretty young before I went. So it's, I think, shaped me a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah. So, and I'm sorry. What ages did you say?
Like 6 to 9.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. No, those are formative years. That's absolutely. Well, cool. I might want to get back to that in a little bit. But so that's where you started off as a human. What about as an engineer? What is your origin story as an engineer?
Well, that actually, in a way, goes back to fourth grade.
Okay.
We had a project in science class, and we made these structures with straight pins and soda straws, and we made these structures, and mine could, hang the most washers on it. And then they said, well, we had to start cutting straws. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I would have designed it differently if I'd known we were going to cut it. I didn't have the words for this. It's like, well, if you had told me that redundancy was a consideration, I would have done something completely different here.
Right.
So, it kind of goes back to that. We built a suspension bridge out of stuff, and I always loved bridges. But in the end, that's not what I did for college. I went to engineering school for lack of a better idea, honestly. I declared mechanical first in my applications. First major I actually had was computer science.
Okay.
Switched from that to linguistics. I didn't understand the subfields of civil engineering, so I was afraid if I aimed for bridges that I would get sewers and roadbeds. Not that there's any insult intended to our fine friends in either geotech or environmental engineering.
Right.
But I wanted bridges, and I knew I didn't think I would get them, because
Sure.
all I was thinking was just those really big major signature projects.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up dropping out of a PhD program in linguistics.
Wow.
And kind of had some time to think about where I wanted to go. And I read this dopey Reader's Digest condensed book about a skyscraper engineer, and I thought, I may not be able to get bridges, but I could do skyscrapers.
Okay.
So then I went back to civil engineering and ended up in grad school at the University of Texas.
Okay.
And I got into the music scene there, and so I wanted to stay in Austin after I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
And the most interesting civil engineering job was with the DOT. So, I kind of put the whole skyscraper idea aside. Okay. And I went in to, do like overpasses and normal stuff like that. I was on the materials side, not the design side. But,
sure.
It took me a while to realize that this wasn't the compromise. This was actually plan A, that I got back to my bridge thing and didn't even realize that I was back to plan A.
Sure.
For a couple of years. And, before I left TxDOT, we actually did do a signature bridge. We did the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge in Dallas.
Okay.
Calatrava Bridge fabricated in Italy.
Sure.
So I got to do my big fancy bridge.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, it's interesting that you went bridges, then looked at buildings, then it came back to bridges. But yeah, and sometimes I feel like people get into this industry looking at buildings first, and then maybe they get into bridges. So you kind of did a sort of a roundabout sort of way of doing things. So that project in Dallas, that I can't remember when that one opened, but it's
Probably
It's impressive.
2011. They were in the process of erecting it when I left in 2010.
Okay. So you're in Pittsburgh now, is that right?
I'm in Pittsburgh now.
Did you go directly from Austin to Pittsburgh?
I did not.
Ah, okay.
No, I went from Austin to Wisconsin to Florida to Pittsburgh.
Okay. That's quite a bit of bouncing around.
It is. It is.
So how long have you been in Pittsburgh?
Since 2016.
Okay. I mean, obviously that's a city with a good steel history.
Oh yeah.
I do want to talk about Pittsburgh in a minute, but let's get back to bridges. I mean, you're being awarded, a lifetime achievement award for bridges. I mean, so I guess is there a way to briefly summarize what you're being awarded for? I mean, your work with bridges.
They didn't really tell me, but if I had to guess, my fingerprints are on most steel bridge related specifications. And one thing that I don't know was actually part of the thinking, but that I think is particularly important about what I do is that because I've been able to be on a lot of different committees, it's not just about the volume of work, it's the intersectionality. And I'm on one committee and I can say, oh, but wait, over here they're doing this other thing and we need to keep that in mind. Right now, I'm kind of the unofficial liaison between AISC and AMP, which is what the merger of SSBC and NACE was. And, so having a foot in a lot of camps lets me help each one of them not be in a silo and work with the others. And I feel like that's the best part of it, more so than just, writing all the specs and doing all the stuff.
Okay.
Not that I'm doing all the stuff, but there's volume, but there's also this broad spread that I think really helps me contribute.
Sure.
So the thing about being on all those different committees is that I've been allowed to be on all those committees. So I got involved in a bunch of committees back when my state employer was really supportive of that kind of thing. And then when the funding for that dried up, they still supported me in allowing me to have the time, and I would self-fund. And then since then, in the private sector, all my employers know me as an established committee person, and I've had no problem getting them to support me in that. But, for those people, I was already established. So the question is, how do we make the next me? How do we build the next person who's got enough of a breadth that they can bring that bigger picture? And I think it's getting harder and harder to have the resources to be able to spare the person out of the office, to be able to spend the money. Everybody's running leaner and leaner. Yeah. And I think we as an industry need to put a little bit of thought into that, into having ways of enabling employers to support their people to do more of this. So they do. I mean, they're all volunteer committees. They're all employer supported. But, the degree to which I and a couple other people are involved in these multiple committees that really ties it all together, I think it's going to get harder and harder to build that. And I don't have the answer to it, but I think that's something that we need to think about as an industry. Sure.
That's good to hear. Yeah, no, and we appreciate your contributions to the industry. On the project side, we talked a little bit about that Calatrava Bridge in Dallas. Is there another project? I mean, there's probably lots of them, but is there one that sticks out in your head as one of the more memorable ones, whether it's because you're proud of it or it drove you crazy or both? Because I ask this question all the time.
Yeah. That's a good question. There was, when I first came to TxDOT very early on, I got involved in another bridge that I think ended up being a NSBA Prize Bridge winner. This set of little arch bridges over US 59.
Okay.
And I was neck deep in that, and was pals with the designer, and it was a really great thing to be able to do just a couple years after I started. So my role was always on the inspection and quality control and quality management side. So as TxDOT, we were verification, inspection, not the down QC, but that's the side that I've always been on. And so I always likened it to so you have the designer who's like the biological parent who contributes the genetic material, and then there's us, and we're like the midwife that helps it come into existence.
Oh, I love this. This is a great metaphor.
So those are the two that really stick out. I've worked for fabricators for about 6 years, but I'm not there's a lot of really cool stuff that we did, but I can't think of anything so specific. We did I was with a fabricator, Tampa Tank and Florida Structural Steel, that did the cable anchorage boxes for Goethals.
Okay.
So that was kind of cool being in Florida, and like I'm originally from the Metro New York area, so I was like, oh, look at that. And that was pretty challenging and interesting to do. But yeah, I actually, I'm in the inspection consulting business now, and I actually miss a lot of that hands-on.
Sure.
You're really there with the steel, and you see it go out the door. And sometimes, of course, as a fabricator, if you go out into the fields because something went wrong, but still, it's fun to go out in the field.
Oh, of course, yeah.
You don't want to have to, but
right. But yeah, it's like, well, I'm here, so I might as well enjoy it, right?
Hey.
Yeah, you've been all over. I mean, like it seems like every side of the steel bridge industry. I mean, you said design, inspection. You're working with publications, fabrication. I'm curious. We talk to a lot of academics today, and we always give out a lot of academic awards. Is there any part of you that's like, now I'm going to go become a professor?
I love teaching. I have 2 master's degrees and 0 PhDs, and there's a reason for that. I have found that it takes about 3 or 4 semesters for me to hit the wall, and that's the end of me. But I do, I miss. So when I was in that linguistics program, I did a lot of teaching, and got to develop my own courses and stuff, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. But the rest of it, I don't know that I'm equipped for it. Generating a whole thesis,
right?
I can write a specification, but not a thesis.
Right. It's funny. Yeah, 2 different types of writing, I guess. Yeah. So linguistics. People who tend to gravitate towards that seem to know more than one language. What else did you study?
So, I didn't study any languages there. I actually came in having satisfied all the requirements that linguists needed to have, because I came in with, I placed at the top 3rd level of French and Hebrew at the time. So
wow.
But I took German for fun.
Just for kicks.
Just for kicks. That Calatrava job, I learned Italian. I took a vacation in Spanish-speaking countries in December, so I did a couple of months of Duolingo, enough to function. Turns out 2 months of Duolingo plus a lot of hand gestures will get you through on a construction site.
Wow.
I can tell you that from experience.
I got to keep this in mind.
But my specialty, which people who know me are not surprised to hear, is semantics, which is basically the relationship between the words in the sentence and the meaning you convey. And it's kind of like formal logic as applied to natural language. And so you say something in that sentence, there's certain things that are implied by it that you can draw conclusions from that are true and certain things that are false. And spec writing is all about that. Spec writing is, we want to write a sentence that excludes all the cases we don't want to include and includes all the cases we do want to include. And it turns out that same mindset, of course, transfers from computer science, from linguistics into engineering specifications.
Sure, which is also kind of like legalese to a certain degree. Yeah,
exactly. That was another path that I sort of contemplated and didn't do, was law, when I was casting about for what I do next.
Yeah, no, just a quick funny story. I was thinking about going to law school, and the closest I ever got was taking the LSAT and doing really poorly on it.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even get that far.
My dad was an attorney, and he didn't like it, and he's like, don't go to law school. Why are you going to law school? And I'm like, honestly, because I don't know what else I'm going to do. And he's like, that's a terrible reason. It'll always be there. Go work somewhere. And if you really want to do it again, you'll go back. And I never did. So
and what you love doesn't always pay.
Right. Exactly. And that's the other thing. But yeah.
So, and that's, I think there's nothing wrong with having something that you like well enough and it pays the bill, and maybe the thing you love is something else that you want to do on the weekends or in the evenings. Right. That's okay.
Right, absolutely. And I think it's pretty typical too. Okay, so on that note, I know you play the violin too.
Yes. So
did you play the violin, or do you still play the violin?
I would say these days I play the fiddle.
Okay.
Same instrument.
Right.
So yeah, what kept me in Austin is I was in a few Irish bands and medieval ensembles, and a Irish/French, actually a French music group. So I played a bunch of stuff, and I was really liking doing it. And so I wasn't ready to walk out of it when I finished the masters. But eventually, it only went so far, but it was a lot of fun, and I'm still doing some of it.
Sure.
Just it was just St. Pat's. I played out a little bit there.
Oh yeah.
So
that's great to hear. In Pittsburgh, what do you've lived there, you said, for since 2016. What do you enjoy? What are some of the things you enjoy most about living there? I think it's a beautiful city. I've only been once, but it was visually, I mean, just from a setting, it was stunning.
Oh yeah, well, it's nice to have like actual geography after living in Texas and Florida for 20 years.
Very flat, especially at least the part of Texas you lived in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Austin had, quote, the hill country, but it's not very hilly. So I don't know. I mean, there's certainly, everywhere you look, there's a nice steel bridge, which is fun.
And they're all yellow.
And they're all yellow, which is not my favorite color, but it's a theme. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like I don't get out much, and then, when I really think about it, I do. There's, music events, and, a friend of mine has a French dance party once a month that I go and play music for.
Wow.
So I guess not something you hear every day in this podcast, but.
No, not at all. No, you are the first, as a matter of fact.
So, I don't know. I mean, this is the first place I've left that I don't have an explicit exit plan for, where I've lived.
Well, maybe that's saying something.
And, I knew I didn't want to stay in Texas. I knew I didn't want to stay in Wisconsin. I knew I didn't want to stay in Florida. But the thing is, after 20 years of deliberately not putting down roots, it's kind of hard to start putting them down.
Yeah.
It's been a way of life. So I don't know what it would take for me to really feel like settled.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, my mother made me buy a house.
Well, but you can sell a house.
True.
But yeah, no, that's an interesting perspective. Yeah. I will say the longest I'd ever lived in one place, in one city, was 6 years, and that was in College Station, Texas. And I've lived in Chicago. I hit that 6-year point in Chicago. Then I hit 10 years. Then I hit 20 years. I'm like, well, we have kids in a house. And it's like, this is home, at least for now. But I mean, it doesn't mean we're going to stay there forever. But it is, we set down our roots. We can always pull them up when we decide to retire. But yeah, well, I'm excited. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to check in the future and see where if you're in Pittsburgh, or where you've moved on to next.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I actually, for the first time in my life, do not have an explicit plan to get out of there. So I guess that's a start.
Yeah, I guess so. Heather, one more question. Just like, as you've gone through your career and ended up where you are, is there anything you want to speak to, or as far as people who have helped you along the way in terms of influencers or mentors or whatever you want to call them? Yeah,
I actually always kind of carry 2 or 3 in mind. So one is Ronnie Medlock. He was my first boss at TxDOT. He was also the TxDOT person in charge of the research project that I did my master's for.
Okay.
And so he hired me to TxDOT. I had another offer at TxDOT, but I went with Ronnie because he already knew what was wrong with me. But he's the one who got me addicted to committees.
That's a different podcast altogether.
Yeah, but he was on a lot of committees then. He has a Lifetime Achievement Award for, among other things, founding the Steel Bridge Collaboration. So he got me involved in all that stuff. So he started the addiction. And he's just a great example of how to be a good people person, most of which I've not succeeded in adopting for myself. He's a far nicer human being than I am. Carl Frank was my graduate advisor at the time. And since he went emeritus, he's been coming to a lot of the committees and stuff. And he's this amazing combination of academic and also practical experience. He did real life before coming into academia, and he's, we're going to lose a lot when he finally decides to retire the rest of the way. And then the third would be Dwayne Miller from Lincoln Electric, who's actually now retired from Lincoln Electric. But another sort of, how to, especially how to be a committee person and how to run a meeting and how to make sense and how to present things in ways that people will understand and relate to and want to do. And, meeting running actually was a big one. So, those are the 3 that I really think of in terms of, like, would I be where I am if not for them?
Sure. Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, no, all fantastic people and all obviously brilliant minds in our industry. So, well, thank you very much, Heather. It's really nice talking to you. Congratulations again on the award.
Yep, thanks.
Take care.
Bye.